Plants vs. Zombies has reached its third soft launch. After over a decade of grueling development hell, is it good? No. I should clarify that this comes from a very dedicated fan who has been around since childhood. This is not me saying everything new is bad for no reason. This franchise has been a slump for many years, and PvZ3 as a whole has contributed to PopCap's sunk cost fallacy of refusing to give up their old ways. Plants vs. Zombies 3 began prototyping in 2015 as a bunch of mockups and concepts that were all unpopular with test audiences. It tried to copy the format of Clash Royale, which we would see later. This resulted in the global release being cancelled for a massive overhaul. We would see PvZ3 publicly for the first time in 2020. This soft launch was incredibly unpopular for having bad gameplay, excessive mobile market practices, and a repulsive art style. In less than a year, the game was pulled offline, and PopCap promised that they would tune it to fan feedback. This was a total lie, and after 4 years of poor betas, Plants vs. Zombies 3 welcomed to Zombies soft launch to abysmal reception. The game launched trying to copy Gardenscapes instead and abandoned the fundamental mechanic, choosing your seeds. In less than a year, it too was shut down. And a year later, we were introduced to the latest version, Plants vs. Zombies 3 Evolved. Instead of copying 2 other successful mobile games, this one opts to copy the popular fan game Plants vs. Zombies Fusions. The story of this game's development goes a lot further, but that's a nice simple rundown. I have a separate video in the works regarding the full history that will come out at some point in the future. Let's start with the biggest issue, the game.
How come you're not naked in this?
PvZ3's biggest drawback is that it handicaps itself by being a mobile game. It has all the bells and whistles that come with the format and ruins the freedom that PvZ Fusions gave, which is of course the homework it's copying. In Plants vs. Zombies Fusions, you were given a plant and were able to go wild with bizarre combinations and form your own distinct strategies. There are quite literally hundreds of ways you could approach a level. In Plants vs. Zombies 3, instead of the series' tradition of unlocking new plants after certain levels, you must grind for seed packets. Seed packets can only be obtained from the Zen Garden, which you can only use a limited number of times. The daily scores, which you can only do a limited number of times, or the plant pass, which is also limited. The game is incredibly stingy with giving you anything to unlock, pushing you to spend $10 to get the premium pass, letting you obtain a plant instantly instead of halfway through the free pass, along with much more currency to level up. This is the biggest problem. Free-to-play progression is a literal nightmare, and there are many roadblocks in the way thanks to zombie leveling. Zombie leveling was a solution to a problem PopCap caused themselves by adding plant leveling. Why are these bad? Well, there are multiple factors. 1. They completely mess up any kind of game design and balance. Plants vs. Zombies 2 is not designed with leveling in mind, so any kind of scaling steamrolls challenge and makes certain zombie counters obsolete. In this game, zombie leveling is way too steep and makes plants like P-Gatling struggle against basic zombies. 2. The game handles leveling horribly. You have to level up every single merge individually. You must level up P-Shooter, Repeater, and P-Gatling all separately, and you can't have later tiers go past the previous tier's level. The entire thing is a convoluted mess full of padding. Since tier 1s are cheaper to level up, you can end up with P-Shooters that are stronger than Repeaters. 3. Since communities are a feature where players must work together, it's not uncommon for communities full of free-to-play players to go nowhere since everyone struggles to progress. New players are better off being lucky by leeching off players who grinded for better stats or flat out paid to get ahead. This results in the billionaire elites being able to get a gigantic unfair elite. I kept doing this. What? 4. There is no point in unlocking new plants anyway because they will all be level 1, and it's much easier to keep rolling with what works than having to regrind just to make a new plant actually usable. Because of how much of a chore it is to level up, it's very easy to prioritize tier 1 plants and never engage with the merging mechanic because later tiers would be too weak. The existence of leveling is already bizarre because merges are meant to be your better, stronger plants. So why do we have both? This feels like it was only here because we have to have another roadblock to grind past, and the Zen Garden is missed potential at best. I think PvZ2 did a decent job giving it a functional use, but it's definitely forgettable. The Zen Garden in PvZ3 is front and center, and using it is mandatory to continue. You can only plant 5 times per day using 3 pots, though you can watch an ad to use a 4th, making every decision extremely important. If you don't grow the right plants, you will not progress and have to wait till tomorrow. There is also a secondary currency called energy that is used to gain the tools needed to grow plants. Spending 1 energy will put you into an odd job, and they are fine. There's only 2 available so far. One that is interesting and actually involves critical thinking, and the other is just a mindless baby game you see in ads. The daily scores is an incredibly badly thought out mechanic. This tracks our top 5 scores of the day and gives rewards based on milestones. However, the entire thing can be cheesed by steamrolling the early levels with your overpowered plants. The Neighborville watch is where your entire community efforts go to use. By growing certain plants and defeating certain zombies, you gain points that fill up a universal meter. When goals are met, everyone can claim the reward. This is a fine enough mechanic, but it's just one of the many grinds. The concept of working together for a common goal is cool, but there's obviously a lot of padding, like useless decorations or meaningless boosts. And that's kind of it. The main gameplay outside of that is just playing levels that all feel similar and unoriginal. Plants vs. Zombies 2 is more intuitive with distinct worlds and plants tied to each area. And because none of that is here, instead being replaced with grinding for seed packets and unoriginal levels, the entire experience is completely mundane and run-of-the-mill. Once you've played 5 levels, you've basically experienced what the game has to offer. Meanwhile, PvZ 1 and PvZ 2 have different modes that change how you play with world-specific minigames. PvZ 3 doesn't. It really does not attempt to be anything more than the bare minimum. I know this is a soft launch, but the game has been in development for over a decade, and this is the 3rd attempt at releasing it. I feel like it is completely justified to judge the product as it is, considering it's meant to represent a rough version of the final product. I think I've made my point, so let's switch to something else. I am not a fan of this game's art style. It definitely has its fans, and I can understand why people like it, but I don't, and I'll get into why. Plants vs. Zombies, in my opinion, has a very grounded art style that doesn't try to simplify its concepts, if that makes any sense at all. It plays its concepts very straight in a somewhat cartoony way, but doesn't deviate from a realistic portrayal. The zombies have charm to them, but they are still disheveled, rotting corpses. With some zombies, you can see their ribs from how malnourished they are. Plants vs. Zombies 2 is definitely guilty of this, but the new art style they're going for completely sanitizes the charm and tries to make everything too cute, which I can only assume is for the sake of marketability. I think the best example is Dr. Zomboss. In the original, he has veins poking against his head. You can tell something is off with them because he doesn't look right. It can be somewhat off-putting, and that's why it's cool. In PvZ 3's overly clean art style, his head is just flat and round, with the veins being flat shapes. He doesn't look like a disgusting villain anymore, just really basic. And if we're allowed to deviate into side material, look how gross Zomboss is allowed to look in Garden Warfare 1 or the comics. It's much harder to take Zomboss seriously as a villain when he doesn't look intimidating at all. The art style in general is just not what makes PvZ PvZ. And it doesn't help that the game doesn't handle being 2.5D very well. There is no anti-aliasing, so it's sharp pixels everywhere, and the texture quality is horrible. You can count the pixels on a loading screen. We saw the pink art style concepts a year ago, and I don't think any of them would have been handled well. I love the pink style, don't get me wrong, but PopCap is really insistent on reusing these 8-year-old animations no matter what. Instead of learning that 3D was a mistake and going back to 2D, they went to 2.5D and had to rework everything into sprites, and I don't see them giving up a second time. The only art style for this game that really had the essence of the original was the 2015 prototypes, in my opinion. This is the only one that feels like it learned from PvZ 2 and had the soul of PvZ 1. And to top it all off, the music is just so boring. I have nothing against the composer, but all of their music for any game sounds like it came from a stock library, and that's a problem when PvZ as a whole is known for having iconic and beloved music. Without any context, if you listen to this, you wouldn't know it was for a PvZ game. So the composer throws in the PvZ theme in literally every song to remind you, hey, this is PvZ music. Not that previous games were exempt from this, but it wasn't in literally every single song. That's not even mentioning how some songs don't match their theming, like how the campgrounds reuse the movie theater theme, or the volcano reuses the beach theme. The game tries to invoke a lot of the calm music from PvZ 1, and it just feels like a bootleg. If you want to make something reminiscent of the original game, you could I don't know, contact the original developers? I don't know why they're afraid of doing that. It's not like they don't care about the series still. PvZ 3 has an issue with story. For the past 2 iterations, the game has been very tied to having a complex plot, and this was the focal point in Welcome to Zomburbia. Now, if you don't know, I'm a big nerd when it comes to PvZ consistency and lore and have an entire Google Doc compiling every detail found in the games. Like, did you know the zombies fought alongside the Germans in World War I? I'm gonna be honest, I kind of don't care this time. Unlike previous versions, which was horrendous,
Zomburbian rules football. What kind of bogus, sussy, made-up sport is that?
This version is kind of inoffensive. A meteor crashes, it creates wacky merges, and both Zave and Zomboss want to harness its power. It's very basic, but there's nothing really to get mad over. Mo is here, who is fine. I don't like them, but that's a personal thing. Patrice and Nate are here. I love these characters dearly because I grew up with the comics, but it's bad. Now, this isn't an issue with PvZ 3. This is an issue with the reboot in general. The comics have seriously flanderized the entire cast into one personality, and it makes them impossible to like. Patrice is the straight woman who is not allowed to have a personality anymore. She must be fed up with her best friend and uncle, and that's all she is. Nate is not allowed to talk about anything but food. That's all he is. Crazy Dave can only make wacky inventions that serve no use. Dr. Zomboss likes feet. That isn't a joke. Of course, I'm being a little extreme, but it's not really that far from how they are portrayed. So, I have been really down on this game, and I think it is completely deserved. But is there anything it does right? Well, I do like some aspects of this game. In my previous review, I made it very clear I liked the community feature, and I still see a lot of potential in it. They added the ability to gift other members a Zen Garden tool. This, in concept, is very cool. I don't like the execution. Giving a teammate a single tool when they can easily get it themselves is pointless. I'd like it more if you could trade merges or seed packets, or simply give them away. This was something you could do in the old 2020 soft launch. I like the references to other PopCap games, even though it really feels like shallow fan service. The fact they'll acknowledge these games, but never actually do anything with them again, leaving those fan bases to rot, leaves a bit of a bitter taste. I mean, I'd rather have the references than not, but it still just serves as a reminder of PopCap's current state. If it isn't their Golden Goose Plants vs. Zombies, they won't do anything with it. Outside of that, crap. I really want to be positive about this game, but one thing I need to say is that forced positivity will never make it improve. Back in the 2024 soft launch, I would see people say we need to praise it, that it's not that bad, and we just need to be grateful that we got anything at all. This entire mindset would have prevented us from getting Choose Your Seeds, a fundamental part of the series' identity. Obviously, the main factor in why they added it was because the game wasn't making the money EA would have liked, but it was clear that it needed to be there. In general, I'm just tired of PvZ being pushed as mobile slop. This franchise is unfortunately a big embarrassment when you look at the official material. PvZ 1 on mobile sucks. PvZ 2 in its current state sucks. PvZ Heroes is in a really mess state. All 3 PvZ shooter games are left rotting, and the PC versions are plagued with hackers, and the comics are filled with terrible foot fetish material. The time PvZ could have broken back out into being on all mediums was with Replanted, and they totally half-assed it by outsourcing it to people who did not care in the slightest about the quality. When I look at PvZ 1, I go, that's a game. When I look at old PvZ 2, I go, that's a game. I don't see a game when I look at PvZ 3. There is so little meat on the bones of every iteration, and what is there is stretched incredibly thin to the point that it's a slog to play. And I think I finally come to terms with the fact that this really does not matter, and that they simply don't care. PopCap can say they're listening to the fans, but the past decade of failed attempts to please us prove otherwise. I don't see them overhauling the entire structure behind this game because it's a mobile game. It's meant to be addictive and bring you back over and over. It's not meant to be a game in the same way PvZ 1 and PvZ 2 were. So unfortunately, I don't think it will get better. I think Plants vs. Zombies 3 is doomed to mediocrity forever.